Aloha, folks. Welcome to another episode of Think on These Things. I have a very special treat for you today. I called our friend, your friend, my friend, Tim Challies. One of the reasons I love Tim Challies is not just because he's a wise man, he knows the Bible, he's ministered to me, ministered to you here at the church, but also because his church, Grace Fellowship Church in Toronto, is very similar in size, in makeup. A lot of times Tim and I just compare notes. What is your church doing? What is your church doing? And we can just sort of find out what each one of us are doing. And just been a great resource for us through the years since we met him a couple of years ago. Tim goes off of support. He is not the senior pastor. He's not a paid staff of that church. He is a pastor, an elder, a teacher at the church, but he's not paid staff. He writes books, writes blogs, and also does some documentary work, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you'd like to support Tim, I'm going to put a link below, maybe even a tab above here, so you can link to his Patreon page and support him in that way. Also, the way that you can support him is by not only reading his blogs, which are free to you, but also downloading his most recent work, a documentary called Epic. Epic, he goes around all these different countries in the world and looks at objects which create the Christian story. And very, very beneficial for you and your family. My family, we purchased it right at the very beginning of the lockdown. And the first 10 days of lockdown, we watched the 10 episodes of that. I think they're like $2 or $3 a piece. And definitely worth your time, worth your energy and effort to just begin to look into Christian history, church history. And Tim does a great job on those things. So I'll leave a link again below to that and to his Patreon page, and you can go that. Without further ado, I'll take you to the interview I did with Tim. After the interview, which is only about 8 or 10 minutes long, after the interview, I'm going to show you something that you haven't seen in a while, and maybe you can just kind of look around and enjoy the sight at the end of the video. All right? What do you, as far as coronavirus and church, what does you guys tack at your church, and what are you thinking in terms of how churches are going to get back? And I know it's hard to predict anything, but if you have any thoughts on, what the future is going to look like,
Yep.
we'd love to hear them.
Hi, Makakila. You want to talk about churches getting back to some semblance of normal? I've been putting a lot of thought into this and what it will look like when churches can return to worshiping together. And I'm assuming it's going to follow kind of the same pattern as got us here, which is that there will be loosening incremental restrictions. So I'm really doubtful there's going to be a time where just snap, everything can go back to normal. You can have 300 people all crammed together in a little room again. I think probably we're going to go back incrementally where they can say 50 people can get back together in a room, but under these restrictions and with proper distancing and wearing masks and stuff like that. So I think we have to be prepared for a slow return to worship rather than an all at once return.
Right. So your church is doing well. No one's sick, or have you guys had some problems, or how's it been going in Toronto?
We don't have anybody in our congregation, any members of our church who are sick. We do have some family members of our church who are sick. And what we do have in our church is people whose family members work in long-term care homes. And that's where in Ontario, especially, we've seen some really serious outbreaks. There's some long-term care homes, nursing homes, where almost half the residents have died of this disease, which just shows a real negligence. And other homes where like the staff have basically just kind of deserted. They're too afraid to go in, or they have elderly family members at home or something. So it's been a real problem.
Are you guys doing, as far as your church goes, are you doing recorded services? Are you doing live streaming? Is it from your teaching pastor's backyard, or are you guys rotating through elders teaching, or how are you guys doing all that?
Yeah, we're doing recorded services. We're not a very technologically astute church. We weren't like way ahead of the curve on this thing. And we thought streaming just introduces a level of problems that can come and just technical issues. So we record the services. Usually 2 elders are involved, both in their own homes. They don't see one another, but one does the pastoral prayer and the scripture reading. The other does the rest of the service. So Paul, our senior pastor, his family is musical, he's musical, so he can handle the singing and the preaching. So he's generally been doing that, and then other elders have been doing the other minor components.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, we have some technology, but it all boils down, in terms of streaming, it all boils down to the
your upload speed, and you have
Yeah.
to pay buku's money to get decent, upload speed so people can have a quality service to watch. But well, good, good. Well, we're kind of thinking the same thing as far as phasing back and how can we rotate people through. We had the same thought. Elders here had the same thought of rotating people through, and but we don't know what it's going to look like and what kind of restrictions they're going to have and how many people and just how comfortable our folks are at coming back and
Yeah.
being around large crowds.
There's pastoral implications about when we do start to meet together. Do pastors tell people we think you ought to? Or do pastors, like, how do you message that? I think for us, it's we feel comfortable at this point. We can gather under these conditions, but we need you to make that decision on your own. We're not pressuring you whatsoever, whether that comes now or whether that
Right,
comes 6 months from now. For you as an individual, you as a family, you know your circumstances. So it may be lots of people are willing right out of the gate. Maybe you got 10 people. That's all that's willing right out of the gate.
right,
Um,
right,
Another thing, I think Makakilo is very much like our church in that you're very multicultural. One of my concerns is you may have some cultural groups who are willing to come to church and others who are not. Um,
yeah,
Similarly, you'll have some demographic groups. Elderly people may return a whole lot later than other people. So how do you pastor people through that when it
right,
could be just one age group and one cultural or background demographic are coming to church and the others are staying away, or some are wearing masks and some are not, different expectations? It could be, I think there will be a lot of issues we need to work through. And then of course in Hawaii, you like to touch each other and hug each other and stuff.
that's right.
In Canada, that's less of a thing, but how do you show that kind of affection
Yeah,
when we've been told very clearly you're not supposed to be passing germs back and forth?
yeah, wow, yeah. We're thinking through a lot of these same things. Tim, what are some benefits you think out of this that you see some benefits in the life of the church, in ministry, that kind of stuff? What do you see any benefits in all this?
Yeah, I don't want to romanticize it. So I think when this situation broke, we were kind of thinking back to like, oh, we know how Christians have done in plagues in the past. Everybody else abandoned Rome and the Christians stayed and they ministered to people and they were the unsung heroes who proved that they could minister despite anything. And I mean, you look back at that through what we know about pandemics in the 21st century and you realize that was a noble thing Christians have done in the past, but maybe Christians are actually circulating the virus. Um,
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
we had
yeah,
this view of what it would mean to minister through a pandemic, never realizing that now in a viral situation like this, the way we can love others is to stay away from them.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think we had this notion of how we would serve, and we've had to do things very differently. So I don't want to romanticize it. It's been in many ways really miserable to not be gathering as a church, to be stuck in home. Even evangelistic opportunities. It's hard when your neighbors are in their houses and you're in your house and you're very rarely seeing one another. And if you do, you're standing far away. So the Lord's up to something. We can't grumble about what He's doing. We can't complain about it. The Lord has, I think, given us a deep desire to worship together. I've heard people say, I will never complain about church again. I will never complain
that's
about
good.
other people again. And I don't believe it, but like I understand that
Yeah,
you don't know what you got till it's gone, as someone
yeah,
once said. Um, I think there will be great benefits through it, but mostly I want to say this is hard, and I think it's okay to lament it. I think it's okay to be sorrowful about it. I think it's okay just to call it what it is, which is a really difficult situation.
one of the things we did right at the very beginning is we went out and purchased your documentary series called Epic, which is looking at different objects all across the world pertaining to Christian history. So, first of all, I want to ask is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. But why should a Christian study Christian history? And then we'll talk a little more about Epic.
Sure, Christians should study Christian history because it's the story of our family. These are our people. When you become a Christian, you enter into something. You're starting something, like you're starting your journey as a believer, but you're entering into something that's been going on for 2,000 years and really longer than that. And so, like, if you're adopted into a family, you take on the last name, you become part of that family, and their history is your history. If there's great things in the past, you feel proud of them. If there's shameful things in the past, you feel shame about those.
Mm,
And either way, it would be wise for you to study your history and to understand the lessons it can teach you. And we as Christians, we're joined into this family. And it behooves us to know what our family has done, to learn from its strengths and to learn from its weaknesses so we can avoid repeating those.
That's great. So I met you 3 years ago in Germany, and that was your
Yeah.
first little foray to Germany on in making this documentary. As I remember, that was just more of a exploratory type trip, but we met there. Tell us the process of Epic and what Epic actually is. I kind of mentioned it already, but what it is and what the process was.
Yeah, years ago, I had this idea to tell the story of Christianity through historical objects. So to find objects that either were very significant in one way or another to history, or that tell a story beyond themselves. Even if the objects are a little bit obscure, they can kind of stand in for a person or stand in for a period of time. So I decided to try and map out that journey. And when we were in Germany, we saw in the museum, the Luther House Museum in Wittenberg, we saw the indulgence box. And so there's a box of the kind that Martin Luther saw paraded through the town, where people would put in their money. They would receive an indulgence that assured them they would not have to bear the penalty for their sin in purgatory, that would be remitted and they could go straight to heaven. That object itself, I don't think it was one Luther ever saw, or that Tetzel, Johann Tetzel, the monk who was selling the indulgences. I don't know that it was ever his, but it stands in and sort of reminds us of the Reformation. Like, here is it was the issue of indulgences that sparked Luther to write his theses that then sparked the Reformation. So finding objects like that can just stand in and really show us something about history. It's a neat way to tell history because you can go and see those objects. They're accessible today. And so that object stands between us and history. People saw it historically, we can see it today. So it's survived the ages to tell a story.
So you're looking at these objects and you're going all over the world.
Yeah. One more thing about indulgences. If you go to Rome, as so many people presumably will again, you can go to the Scala Sancta, the sacred stairs, and you'll see right there a placard telling you, if you go up if you go up and you pray a certain prayer on every step, and you do it on a holy day, on Easter or something, you get a full indulgence, a plenary indulgence. If you do it on other days, you get a partial indulgence. And there's these other stipulations there, but this is still very common amongst traditional, especially old world Roman Catholics, is the system of indulgences, where the penalty of your sin is remitted if you do certain acts and do them in a penitent spirit and all of that. So anyway, so the premise of the project was to find these objects. And so we traveled all over the world, 24 countries, just looking for objects that all together would be able to tell this story. We made a book out of it, we made a film out of it, and called them both Epic. And it's been really neat to see the product finally come out after it's over 2 years since I started the travel. And been really neat to see people's response to it.
Yeah, it was great. So our family bought it. I think it's like $3 an episode or something like that, and we bought them all. And there's 10 episodes, and not every episode is just one place or one object. Sometimes you combine two together. Oftentimes you combine a couple together, and our family just loved it. In fact, our family, we sat there. It was sort of a positive negative for us, because now all my kids want to do is travel. They're like, we want to go there. We got to go to Germany. They all want to go to Germany. But they want you to take us to Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, all that area, because you were in Scotland, you lived in Scotland and went back to Scotland. So we need you to be our
amazing
tour guide.
places, and there's so much to see. And one thing I hope people take away from it, so I wanted to motivate people to think about church history, hopefully to dive deeper into church history. Through it, you'll be able to meet some interesting characters, but you'll just get a brief introduction. So hopefully you can read a full-length biography or watch a full-length documentary on those people. The other thing I want people to do is, travel, but look locally. And so one of the things that struck me as I was traveling the world is the irony of, I'm going to New Zealand to look for church history, but I'm not looking in my own backyard. And so I started looking diligently in my own area, and I found some really neat characters, some really neat objects as well. So I'd encourage people to, especially now, you can't go too far afield, maybe a while before you can do international travel. Just ask the question, what has God done historically in our neighborhood? And it might be Hawaii with a relatively recent Christian history. It might be Canada with a slightly older one. It might be Europe, it might be Africa, all different eras where the gospel was introduced. But you can find some history there, and you can give thanks and praise to God for what he's done right there in your own neck of the woods.
Okay, so last question is this. Any other projects coming down the pike that you're allowed to tell us about, or you can't say anything?
Yeah, evaluating a couple of possibilities now that I can't really talk about yet. The one that we've announced is a project called Worship Around the World, which is perhaps a bit of a contemporary version of Epic, where hopefully, now this was a worldwide travel project that has been interrupted by the complete silence or the complete inability to travel. But travel around the world and find local churches that are worshiping in a way that is true to scripture, but also, I guess, relevant within their culture, true to their culture. So the
Yeah,
hope is we can go to Cambodia, we can go to Zambia, we can go to all these different places and find Christians there who are truly worshiping God according to scripture, yet doing so in ways that reflect the peculiarities of their own culture. And so I would hope that if I go to rural Zambia, I won't find people there singing, I don't know, metrical Scottish psalms, that kind of stuff, but hopefully they're singing good content, even psalms if they want to sing psalms, but they're doing it in a style that's appropriate there. And their preaching might be a little bit different. The way they do church might be different. You go to India, you'll find the men sitting in some churches, men sitting on one side of the room, women sitting on the other side of the room. These are cultural things that are not wrong, that are not right. They're just cultural things. And I'm
yeah,
looking forward to exploring some of that.
that's great. And as I remember, you're hoping to get to places like Fiji and Samoa as well, right? Maybe even
Yeah,
using Hawaii as a springboard to get to those places. So maybe we'll see you.
that's the hope. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Got a friend of mine, a friend of yours as well, lined up for Fiji, hoping to go and visit him there. And yeah, I'd love to get to American Samoa as well. We'll see.
Great, fantastic. Thanks so much, Tim. And we wish you the best and pray that God will bless you guys and your family and your church as well.
Thank you. I hope I can see your church again soon. I'm just so enjoy it. So thankful for it.
All right, see you soon.